And welcome back to the Luke Deckard Show. I am your host, Luke Deckard. How's it going? Hope everyone had a good week. Last week was quite fun. Last week we had, had James Benmore, Vaseem Khan, Matthew Booth on the show. We had a good discussion talking about Knives Out. Good bit of critiquing. I thought, hey, what was more fun than getting four crime writers together than and picking apart Rian Johnson's new film. So that was quite fun. But this week it's a little bit more chilled. I'm just going to talk about a couple of things that I watched over the Christmas, New Year, early January period, and give my thoughts on them. So yeah, this is gonna be a short one. I think not gonna be here for very long, but yeah, might as well dive in. So we watched a couple of films over the Christmas New Year period. We watched The Menu, which was interesting. Watched the other day, The Pale Blue Eye, which was also interesting. And the big thing that we watched that was the most time consuming over the Christmas period was Wednesday on Netflix, which was again interesting. But I'm going to tell you why it was interesting. So I want to chat first about The Menu. Let me just pull my notes up, because it's good to go off notes, right? I'm not good at like freestyling. Well, sometimes I am. It depends on how fired up I am. So The Menu was quite fun. This was I just kind of headed off. I actually really enjoyed The Menu. So The Menu is about a young couple that travels to a remote island to eat at an exclusive restaurant where the chef has prepared a lavish menu with some shocking surprises. It has a really good cast. Stars Anya Taylor-Joy, Ray Fiennes, Nicholas Hoult, Hung Chow, and a whole bunch of other people. This one was interesting to me because I'm not a big horror fan. I don't sit and watch a lot of horror movies where this is this is basically just straight up horror movie. But it's also kind of a dark comedy, which there was a lot of things that intrigued me about it when I watched the trailer. There were some good jokes in the trailer. There was an interesting kind of premise, and yeah, I was hooked by the trailer alone. But generally, horror films don't really hook me. So, for example, like I wasn't really interested in seeing there's that new film out called Megan. Things like that. I don't really get behind. I don't really care about. But for whatever reason, I was interested in watching this. I think it was a mixture of cast and just thinking the trailer was a very, very good trailer. So The Menu is really interesting. It's funny to me that there are a handful of stories out there right now that feature rich people going to islands and getting embroiled in some sort of mess. Obviously, building off of, there's a lot of comparisons between The Menu and Glass Onion, which we discussed last week. Glass Onion and The Menu both have the same general premise in which you have a group of rich a-holes being dropped on an island and finding their lives in danger. But these films go about the topic in very, very different ways. One, I think, handles the material very well, while the other does not. Glass Onion in its commentary was so. It's interesting because both of these movies have a similar commentary in that they're both talking about kind of looking at the greediness and the selfishness of rich and arrogant people, but and trying to do it through like a comedic lens, right? And the thing is, with The Menu, I found that the comedy totally worked, whereas the comedy in Glass Onion felt like it just felt like a disaster. It wasn't funny. It was really ham-fisted and kind of like shoving it down your throat, and also just quite, I think, juvenile at times. Where the menu, the menu, I think, really, I think it knew this film knows what it is, and it knows how to handle the comedy that is trying to portray, which I think was a big difference between the menu um, and Glass Onion. But yeah, so anyway, so it was quite a fun film. Um, its basic commentary is there's a couple of layers of commentary. I think I can't remember. I listened to someone talk about this film, and they felt that it was a bit surface with its commentary. I actually disagree with that. I think there's a lot going on in what appears to be a kind of surface level horror about rich assholes. Um, but one aspect of the kind of the commentary I think of this movie is it's interesting as it sort of explores avant-garde art, and its critics, right? Um, so what's quite fun is you have all these characters who are turning up to this prestigious island restaurant where they're going to be, you know, shut inside the restaurant and fed all these elaborate foods, and Ray Fiennes, who is the chef, is concocting these. There's all this, you know, when you go online and you try and find a simple recipe for, like, I don't know, carrot cake or macaroni and cheese, like these the people who write these recipes want to give you some like elaborate life story, right? And so you have that going on this whole time. Each sort of dish that is being prepared has this big kind of grand story behind it, some sort of emotive thing that is, you know, trying to be evoked, and trying to make the eating of the meal is meant to be a an experience, almost like a spiritual experience, which I found quite interesting. But at the same time, it also does that sort of, it kind of makes a joke of the avant-garde. Like there's one of the dishes that are prepared where they serve the guests bread, but it's breadless bread. So it's basically just a dish of condiments. And before the dish is served, Ray Fiennes gives this big speech about how bread is the food of the poor. Kind of going back to the origins of bread and all this kind of stuff. And it's really funny. And then what you see is all of these guests are just lapping it up, except for one. And that guest is Anya Taylor Joy's character, whose name is Margot. Um, she is a last minute guest who joins Nicholas Holt on this experience. And so every time a dish is coming out, she is rolling her eyes. She is not amused by any of it, which is basically us. You know, she is the audience coming into this insane world, and is she's kind of juxtapositioned by Nicholas Holt, who is his character, which is named Tyler. He's very much into it. He is a fanboy of the chef. So everything that he is preparing and doing and saying is almost as if God is speaking to him, which is very interesting, and I think speaks to something bigger, which I'll discuss a little bit later on. But oh, hey, we got someone in the chat. We got Biffer. Hey Biffer, how's it going? How's it going? Biffer, we're talking about the menu. Talking about the menu right at the moment. I don't know if you've seen it, but if you have, let me know what you think in the chat. What was I saying? So yeah, Taylor, the character of Tyler, not Taylor, Tyler. Strange World ain't that bad. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that. But I can look that up though. The menu, yeah. So the character of Tyler is quite interesting. Like I said, he's just very invested in what the chef is and what the chef is preparing and doing, and you just sort of get this cringe vibe from him that that I loved. I love to hate basically, because you sort of know all these you know people like him who are just so absurdly invested in a particular thing, whether that's this he's invested in the food, whether there's that someone invested in music or some sort of art or some sort of thing. There's just someone who's kind of obsessive about it, and they pretend to be knowledgeable about it, but really they're just an idiot, and deluded, and that is essentially what Tyler's character is, which I really liked. Um, but then you get a quite interesting array of characters as well. Most of them are on some sort of level of snob, right? Um, Jenna McTeer's character, she plays Lillian, who's a food critic, and I mean, she is just she's so obnoxious, but it's wonderful how obnoxious she is. She is this sort of she kind of perfectly encapsulates that highbrow snobbery, and criticism that sort of they see themselves as being just amazing and refined and perfect, and only the best is for them, and nothing really achieves the best for them, um which is quite fun, and you get that sense. And then there's a wonderful line from Ray Fiennes' character, in which he basically defines everyone as he says that they are really, he says what he is trying to do with his food is that he's trying to satisfy people who are never satisfied. And that really sums up everyone at this event, except for Tyler and except for Margot. But everyone else is sort of picky and unhappy, and not necessarily just unhappy with the food. Some of them are unhappy with their, never satisfied with their lives or with their career, which again is really an interesting layer that I think goes a little bit unnoticed by certain people. Um, I think you have the washed up actor, who's pretending to be friends with the chef and all that kind of stuff. But he is, obviously very unsatisfied with his life, right? You have the old couple who are there, and I think the guy's like a politician or something like that. And obviously he's had an affair, so he's not satisfied with his marriage, and his wife isn't satisfied with the marriage either. So you have this, it works on a couple of levels, which I thought was very, very cleverly done, very cleverly done. um and then you also get it with the kind of the Silicon Valley boys who are who are there. They are just so obnoxious. And there's this really great moment in that in the film where the waiter, whose name is Elsa, whispers into one of their ears that you'll eat less than you deserve. But no, she says you'll eat less than you deserve and more. You'll eat less than you deserve, and more than you deserve. Which was just such a good line. I butchered that line, but it's a really good line. It's basically, what I loved about that is they are quite obnoxious, and they're so entitled. But this Elsa, the waiter, just constantly brings them back down to size, which it's that thing that, if you've ever worked in service, it's that thing you always want to do to someone who's being rude to you, instead of just sort of having to accept it and take it. You just at some point you just want to say, like, no, shut up and eat your food. And she does that quite wonderfully, I think. But again, kind of going back to the character of Tyler. What I found really interesting is he really views Chef as God, right? Um, and he views himself as being sort of a protege of this God, and wants to be on that level of his. And there's a moment in early on where he is, they're introduced to some of the staff, or they're talking to one of the kind of the sous chefs, and and Tyler, the sous chef knows Tyler's name, and they have a bit of a conversation. And then when they walk away, Margot says, "He knew your name." He's like, "Well, yeah, they have to." And she's like, "Well, you didn't ask him his name." And he's like, "Yeah, pff," because in his opinion, why would he ask that? They are all, they're all beneath him. So he really is just clawing at trying to feel superior in this situation, which is it's so gross. But people who do that. People who just, yeah, and you really want to sort of like punch him in the face. Um, and as we were watching the film, I made this comment, and I said that it's almost religious. There's something quite religious about this whole film, about the way the chef presents himself, the way Tyler's looking up to the chef. There's it's very sort of there's very sort of cultish at times, um, which was fascinating to me. And there's a line in there where Tyler says that, when he's kind of talking about how wonderful the chef is. He says, he basically diminishes all forms of art, and elevates the art form of cooking, to be the kind of the pinnacle of art, because he says chefs play with raw material, they play with death. They're playing with, you know everything they're playing with is dead on some level, dead, animals, dead vegetation, things like that. And so you really get that sense that he is, in his mind, he is just exploded in sort of, idolizing the chef. um and and yeah, so what's interesting then about this whole scenario is, then as people are you know getting their food, getting their dishes, things start to kind of ramp up. And there's an interesting scene where they're all given, like a pancake sort of thing, and on it are pictures, and it's some sort of, you know wicked thing that person has done. So the old man just had an affair. It's a picture of him having an affair, of, the Silicon Valley boys. It's proof that they are doing some fraudulent transactions and stuff like that. And then this is sort of where the film just goes bonkers, because what happens is the chef just lays out what's going to happen, and essentially this is going to be their last meal. And then at the end of the meal, they are all going to die. He is going to kill them all. Um, and they all just sort of sit there and accept it. Every once in a while, one or two people might try and run away. But they'll do it. They'll do it separately. But there's something to be said about this room full of people who just essentially sit there and accept this fate. There's a bonkers scene in which one of the sous chefs blows his brains out in front of everyone, and the room is, at first, they're shocked and stunned by it, and they're like, "Oh, this can't be real. This can't be true." But then, but then they start to kind of convince themselves that it's all part of the show, that it's theatrics. And there's this weird sort of, juxtaposition between, should I be terrified or should I be amused? Not really sure. Um, and I love that, and that kind of spoke to the cultish aspect of the movie, in which the chef really has become a cult leader, and he is on this like righteous mission to kind of bring judgment down on, like I said, like selfish and ignorant wealthy people. Um, and but then you have the character of Margot, who, Anya Taylor Joy. She was terrific in this film. Everyone was in their own rights, but she was very good, because a being she was not meant to come on this trip anyway with Nicholas Holt's character, and this bothers the chef the whole time. He keeps saying, "You're not meant to be here," because the menu is tailored to each individual, but he knows nothing about Margot, and it disturbs him. Um, And then he asks her, "Do you want to die with them or do you want to die with us?" Because not only are the guests going to die, but so are the staff. Everyone's going to die in this sort of cultic, ritual of nonsense. And it's determined that she's going to die as part of the staff. As a result of that, she's asked to go and fetch a barrel somewhere off site. And as she does, she breaks into what is the Rafe Fiennes's living quarters that are only designed for him. When she's in there, she finds a bunch of relics of his past, and she sees this picture of him as a young man, smiling, happy, making a cheeseburger, right? And and it tells you something about him, and she it clicks with her what that picture means to him, right? So anyway, when she gets back to the room, that they're building towards the crescendo. They're building towards the final chorus, which is going to be death. And she makes the observation, which she tells the cooks, "I don't like any of your food. I want to send it back." And Ray finds is stunned by this. How could she say this? And I love that, because then what she does, which is very, very clever, I think, is she tells the chef that actually what she wants is she wants a cheeseburger, which is what she saw him making in that picture. And then, because what that picture represents is she basically is trying to appeal to the chef's humanity. He has lost all touch of reality, all touch of his humanity, because he is so embittered and frustrated by these rich and wealthy people who come to him, but also in many ways, you know, they've sucked all the joy out of making food. And so she appeals to that. That is the joy, right? And so I love that. So he makes the burger. It's great. She takes a bite and then says, "Actually, you know what? I'm full. I would like this to go." And he then packs it up, gives her to-go box, and lets her leave. And she's the only one. She's the only one who gets away, which I found remarkable. It was so fun to see that play out, because everyone else is they were all so passive in everything, in what they were doing, and they just sort of let it all happen. Um, I think one of my friends kind of compared that moment to uh, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, in the kind of uh, in which Charlie hands gives back the sweet that he's taken, right? Um, but for me, there was something a little bit different about it. There was more, there was like I said, an interesting sort of religious theme going on throughout this whole film. Whether intentional or not, I'm not sure, but that was something that I was getting. And and like I said, so the chef is like this cult leader who is going to bring about the destruction of these arrogant, selfish people. And there was something sort of Noah's flood like for me with this story. He is very much the vengeful God, right? Who is sick of the depravity of all these people. But this character of Margot, appeals to the vengeful God chef, right? And sort of wins his favor, and as a result is able to take the boat and rescue herself. Take the boat with provisions, with the burger and the fries, and she gets away. Um, and I love that. I thought that was a really interesting motif. Whether that was fully intentional or something I just kind of read into it, I don't know. But I thought that was very clever. So, mm, I think highly recommend the menu. I think if it's well worth saying. It's like I said, comparing it to Glass Onion, it's much better than in terms of its themes of commentary of social class and ignorant wealthy people, and much better handling of comedy. And yeah, but so highly recommend the menu. Um, The something else that the other thing that I watched recently was The Pale Blue Eye. So I was really excited about The Pale Blue Eye. I'm a sucker for a good murder mystery. I love my crime fiction. Thought, hey, Christian Bale, great actor. Gillian Anderson's in this, love her. Um, Toby Jones, who's in every movie ever, he's great. So yeah, I was intrigued by this. Also, the setting looked really cool. It's like what 1830s or 1840s or something like that. America, very sort of rural and gritty. Very it gives the kind of the style gave me vibes of a little bit of like kind of like Sleepy Hollow, um, which is another really really good film. I really enjoy that one. So anyway, quite excited to see The Pale Blue Eye. Put it on the other day, and what can I say? What can I say? I think visually the film is great. There's a really good sense of atmosphere. It's also very gothic-y without being over the top. And it also is very cold. You get because it's set during winter time in sort of New Yorkish area. It's just everything is sort of blue and there's snow and everything just looks like it's so freaking cold. Um, which I loved. So there was the film is successful in sort of creating a good sense of place, and atmosphere, I think. The acting generally is pretty good, but I do the one person in particular who just I think was just well, no, there's two people who were totally over the top. One was Timothy Spall, who played some kind of superintendent at this academy. So if you don't know, the Pale Blue Eye is sorry about the description is a world weary detective is hired to investigate the murder of a West Point cadet, who then gets the help of a young Edgar Allan Poe. And the mystery it's bonkers. So you have this kid who is found hung hung in the woods, and while his body was in the mortuary, his chest was cut open and his heart was removed. And so Bale's character is trying to find out, a who killed him and b who stole his heart and why, right? Um, so anyway, acting, like I said, is generally very good, but two characters are just absurd. One is Timothy Spall, who plays the superintendent at this place. He just has this like look of like this look on his face as if the biggest stick in the world has been shoved up his asshole, um, and he's so uncomfortable. But also his accent is so kind of over the top American. For me it was just like, dude, you need to dial it back about 12 notches because what you what you're doing is ridiculous. Um, but then the other person who did that, which I'll come to a little bit later, is Gillian Anderson. From the minute you meet her, she's so over the top that it's hard to take serious, but it's also a bit of a giveaway. But I'll speak to about that a little bit more in a minute. Um, but I will say that Harry Melling, who was uh, Dudley in the Harry Potter movies, he plays Edgar Allan Poe, and he looks eerily like Poe. I think they cast really well for that, and his acting is good. He does a really good job playing this sort of strange, clever, artistic uh, poet and sort of individual who is very good with mysteries. So I really liked his performance. But there's problems. There's a lot of problems with this film. One, it's too long. It's way 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 too long for what happens in the movie. It just really doesn't justify the runtime by any stretch. I think it's like 2 hours and 10 minutes, but honestly, you you could probably, if I'm being harsh, I would say you could probably cut this down to an hour. But realistically, this film should have been no longer than an hour and 20. It really didn't need. There wasn't enough in it to justify 2 hours. The other problem with it is that the mystery never really gets cooking. There's a lot of meandering, a lot of walking around, a lot of talking, but you never really feel like the stakes are being raised. It's anytime there is anytime there's a moment in which it feels like the stakes are about to be raised, there's some sort of intrusion into the story that pulls the detective somewhere else, and you're like, and so it's frustrating because he's on the verge of something big, and then yeah, gets completely pulled out of that moment, and you're left kind of thinking, well, what are we doing now? What's going on? So I didn't like that. That happened many times. But as I said, Gillian Anderson character, when you first meet her, she's so hammy that it's obvious. It's painfully obvious that she is going to be evil. That she is in some way part of this mystery, and going to be one of the baddies, if not the baddie. Um, e- Everything about what she was doing was over the top, and again, it's you almost get the feeling like when you're watching these scenes, you're like, Why is someone not telling you to dial it back?" Or does no one have the kind of the guts to tell some of these actors to dial it back? Or is it that the actors just don't care? They kind of know this film is not that good, so they're just hamming it up and trying to have a good time. I'm not sure, but this her performance, and she's a great actor, but her and particularly Timothy Spall, both of them were just so over the top that it was very hard to stomach that one. Um, but but in addition to that, the plot is very thin, which adds to the problem of the runtime being way too long. Um, like there's one point where Christian Bale is in bed with a barmaid, and she's a complete non-entity. Like we don't know anything about her. We barely know her name. She's just kind of there to assure him that Poe is a good guy. Um, and along the way, as Bale's character is trying to work out the mystery, there's this sort of there's a cult aspect to it, in which the cutting out of the heart is leading them to speculate that there is cultic practices going on. The problem is that really doesn't go anywhere. Bale's character finds a plot, an area in which ceremonies are conducted, right? Um, but I sort of compare it to like the first Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr. The cultic practices are a huge thing in that particular movie, and it's everywhere. Every kind of interaction that Holmes is having, it's there. With this, it just sort of it comes and goes, quite fleetingly. There's really no depth to it. Um, and there's one moment, after the first boy is found dead, that there's references to some cattle mutilations, but we never actually see the cattle mutilation. We don't really get invested in anything. There's just, like I said, everything else is just meandering and walking around and talking, which was just quite frustrating. Um, and the other thing, with this kind of in addition to like thin plot, is the characters are really all one dimensional, which is quite frustrating because you have a really good cast, who you could tell were acting their hearts out with some of this stuff, but there was just very little depth to any of their characters. And one thing that kind of bothered me was Bale's character. So Bale is troubled by his daughter, who's apparently run off. But we get, it's mentioned early on. He has one sort of weird dream sequence, but we get very little insight into who Bale's character is. Who what was his life? Why is he the way he is now? It's very thin. And then at the end of the movie, bizarrely, we get this 20-minute long exposition dump that sort of explains his daughter who's run off, and this is the ending for me, is where the film just totally falls apart. There's certain rules, quote unquote rules in crime fiction, right, in which they say that the killer should never be the narrator, right? And essentially, because essentially what that means is that the viewer or the reader is not able to digest the story properly, or solve, or have all the clues in front of them to potentially be able to solve the case. And that's the problem here. Poe basically works out that there are two baddies in this story. There are a group of people who are interested in the occult, and they needed a heart, and so this dead body provided them with that heart, which was sort of a misdirection, as it were, because the real killer of the first kid and a couple others, as the story progresses, um, is Christian Bale's character, and Poe works this out because Christian Bale has given him a sample of writing, right? And it's just it was really frustrating to me because I didn't feel that it A, played fairly, and B, the solution was too simplistic. Poe didn't actually when Poe storms into Christian Bale's house and accuses him of being the murderer and works it all out, and we get the whole exposition dump of his daughter, in which basically what happened is Poe's daughter, or not Poe's daughter, but Christian Bale's daughter in this film was raped by three of the cadets at this academy, so he went after them and decided to kill them, right? Because the kind of the torment that it brought upon his daughter caused her to commit suicide and jump over a cliff. Um, so what annoyed me was that if that was going to be part of the story, why in the world did why were we not watching Poe throughout this story begin to solve and create and work out this mystery? It made no sense to me that wasn't happening. He just sort of at one point he gets knocked out from a drug and is in the infirmary for a little bit of time and wakes up dramatically and has solved it because he solved it in a dream. And that was just such a cop out. I That really, really agitated me. As murder mysteries go, I've seen a few people on Twitter who thought this mystery was just the bee's knees, but for me it was, like I said, thin characters, very, very, very bland plot. Visually looks great, like I said, but that kind of solution of Bale is the killer the whole time. Poe works it out in a dream. We don't see any of that or get any hint of that throughout the film. I mean, even I would have imagined like there could have been interesting scenes between Christian Bale and some of these other boys who had done what they did to his daughter. You could have had a really interesting bit of tension between them, but there's not. So alas, it's a bummer because yeah, Pale Blue Eyes and The Glass Onion, films that I really probably should like because they're right at my street in terms of crime fiction, stuff like that, just completely failed to deliver, unfortunately. Um, but I got one last thing I want to talk about, and then I'm going to let you all go. So I'll be rather brief on this. Wednesday, we watched Wednesday on Netflix. Now, all I saw in the advertising for Wednesday were some of the trailers that I didn't really care about, and Tim Burton's name everywhere. And I haven't enjoyed anything from Tim Burton since like what did he do? I don't know. Sweeney Todd. Very, very long time ago was the last time I enjoyed something that he had his name attached to. So over between Christmas and New Year's, we decided to watch Wednesday. And if you don't know, Wednesday follows Wednesday Addams from the Addams Family, her years as a student, when she attempts to master her emerging psychic ability, thwart and solve the mystery that embroiled her parents. So very kind of there's it's very kind of pre-teeny, catering to kind of a Sabrina like audience. But the thing is, this show is actually amazing. It's terrific, I thought. And when we watched the first episode, I realized a couple of names were on there. It said created by Miles Goff and Alfred Miller. And if you don't know, they're the creators of Smallville. So when I saw that, I kind of felt more at ease because there's very little that these guys do that I haven't enjoyed. Um, and Wednesday was no different. What I liked about it is there were Smallville fingerprints all over the show, but in a good way. And what I like about Goff and Miller is they know how to breathe fresh air into certain properties. I think they really they really breathed fresh life into the character of Superman when they created Smallville, and I think they've done that here with Wednesday. They've taken this, everyone knows the Addams Family, this however many decades old franchise this is, and they've done something interesting with it, far more than what I think I've seen in the past. Um, I think it's wonderfully gothic. It's hilarious. The humor in this is wonderful. Um, and actually this show sort of falls in line with sort of crime and mystery. I think like Smallville, there were always mysteries that they were trying to solve. Who's the killer, who's this and that and the other, and that was heavily inspired by sort of X Files as well. So you get that here. There is a sort of building mystery going on throughout this series of, there's a particular monster out there. They're trying to work out who the monster is, what their goals are. While also she's trying to solve a particular problem that linked back to her parents' days when they went to this particular school. Um, and I think what I loved about it, kind of thematically, right, is, and this is what, you could find this in Smallville. Goff Miller also did some writing for Spider-Man 2, and you can see it in there. But what I like thematically is they really know how to do these interesting themes of sort of, know who you are, not comparing yourself to others, knowing who to trust, not letting friends down. There's these wonderful sort of adolescent themes that run throughout this entire show that are handled so well. And I think character wise, the characters in Wednesday are very rich. They're all three dimensional dudes and dudettes. Which I loved. And it's another thing that Goff and Miller do is that they write excellent child parent relationships. And they really know how to nail sort of family values, and it's so fun seeing them do that in this show about this sort of gothic horror family. And where, kind of happiness and roses and butterflies are sort of, standoffish stuff, so they're doing it in this very gothic way, which I've just found absolutely hilarious. But there's really, I think, what I loved was, the character of Wednesday was played by Jenna Ortega, does a fantastic job. Her sort of deadpan, serious delivery is wonderful. And there's just these little hints of emotion, hints of change throughout the series that I think they were handled so well. But what you really get at the center of this, sort of like with Smallville, where Clark is like trying to find his place in the world as this outsider, right? Who is he? You sort of have that situation going on with Wednesday. She is really, there's a bit of tension between her mother Morticia and herself, and Wednesday is feeling very much living in the shadow of her mother, and that's something that throughout the course of the series has to be dealt with and overcome, and they do it wonderfully. There's also really wonderful scenes between, like father daughter scenes between Gomez and Wednesday that were sort of like bizarro world, Clark and Jonathan kind of stuff. Um, and so I think that was something that I loved about Wednesday, is similar to Smallville. It was just, it was funny. It was they harked back to a lot of kind of horror and gothic stuff. They built well on the Adams family mythos and things like that. But there was just a real sense of sort of, I think, kind of coming, kind of a coming of age story that I really appreciated with this one. Um, because one of the interesting things about the character of Wednesday, she's very much learning to not be this sort of island kind of, all on her own. She's learning to make friends and have friends and understand the value of friendship, right? So I am total advocate for Wednesday. I thought it was an absolutely wonderful show. And like I said, there are a couple of different mystery plots going on throughout the show, and unlike the Pale Blue Eye and unlike Glass Onion last week, it's a genuinely good mystery story. It you are constantly trying to guess and work out who is who and who is what, and what their motivations are. And the minute you think you have it figured out, something happens, and then it makes you question what is or what isn't. So to me, that was a good sign of a good mystery, good story. So yeah, highly recommend Wednesday. Um, but yeah, so Biffer in the chat says Wednesday got copyright infringement problems, and this problems. The series going to Amazon for season 2. Apparently, it's not going to Netflix. It's going not going to Amazon. Apparently, it is staying on Netflix. I heard that it was going to Amazon, but that apparently the deal was already done with Warner Brothers and Netflix before Amazon bought the WB. So apparently it's staying on Netflix. But I tell you what, if they move it to Amazon, if long as the creative team is there, which they will be, don't care where it is. I'll watch it wherever it lands, because I thoroughly love that show. But yeah. So anyway, that's all I got for today, guys. I am going to let you go because I got some other things I got to do. So this was just a quick one, a brief 40 some odd minute chat, which was nice to come and hang out for a bit. But I'll be back next week. I have Jonathan Whitelaw on the show. He's a author and journalist. We're going to be discussing his top 6 films and books. That's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, I will see you guys and gals next Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. GMT. So until then, have a good week, Biffer. Thanks for joining me in the chat. Always a pleasure to see you. And yeah, have a good rest of your week, everyone.